Hello and welcome back to another episode of Injustice For All MMA. My name is David, and this episode is for UFC Fight Night Barboza versus Chikadze. Overall, it was a good night of fights. Great night of fights. A little nuance, a little bit of weird scorecards, but nothing serious, nothing too crazy. But let's just start with the first big thing, which was there was one injustice. Okay. This one isn't, I don't know how to really feel about this one. It's not like serious. And I want to say this carefully because the whole point of this show is that, if judges get the fight wrong, then I come here and I wail or I scream or whatever I do. But this one has a little less pop in it because it comes via the numbers. And just like most of them do, this one's a little different because in the final round, and I'll just clarify, this fight I'm talking about is Alvey versus Turman, depending on how you want to pronounce it. This is the first injustice. Now, my scorecard is 28-27 Alvey. Okay. And in that third round, because this is where it comes down to, in the first two rounds, all three judges gave it to Turman. In that final round is where this comes up a little weird. I gave the final round to Alvey. In that final round, Alvey outstruck Turman, but Turman got two big takedowns. I'm sorry, though, I'm reading the first round notes. In the last round, Alvey outstruck Turman. Was it by a lot? Definitely not, but he outstruck him in that third and final round. And it gets a little weird here because in the first two rounds he's losing, for sure. In the final round, he gets hit with two illegal eye pokes, and throughout the entirety of the fight, he's had his hands near Alvey's eyes. And he gets deducted 2 points. Now, the way these numbers should go, Alvey should win. Period. He should win barely, pretty much. 28-27, the exact way it's scored. Only one judge has it that way, and that's Adelaide Bird, who gives him a 10-9, but minus the 2 points. It's a 10-7. And that's how I feel it should have been scored. And for some reason, it's not. The other two judges just don't see it that way. The other two judges, Derek Clearly and Ron McCarthy, see it the other way. They believe Turman did enough to win that final round, which I don't feel that's how it was, because before those two eye pokes, Alvey was getting him. Alvey was getting Turman. Now in those first two, it's a different story. Before we even got to the third round, I was going to have a discussion about the first where Alvey was outstriking Turman, but in that last, I want to say, in that last maybe a minute to 30 seconds, Turman gets like two big takedowns and then lands a really big shot that opens up Alvey. And I scored it that way. I scored Turman winning that round, but I just had that thought in my head where I was thinking, in any other normal fight, there's a fight on this card that we'll get to later where an opponent is being outstruck and he gets a couple takedowns and some judges give him the round, and I disagree with that, obviously. But in this, it's a little different, right? Because the strikes are relatively close and he got the two takedowns at the end. And then he landed the big shot that opens Alvey. Turman did. I was thinking about that round. It just kind of washes in your head a little bit. Obviously, I ended up giving it to Turman, but it makes you think a little bit. Some rounds are so weird that it makes you think a little bit. Overall, this is an injustice. Alvey should have walked away with this. He should have won this, but instead he didn't. He lost. It is what it is. Yeah, it's an injustice. It is what it is. I wish I was more mad about this than normal, but it's yeah. Now we move to the honorable mentions. I don't know how this thing is turning into. It seems as though I'm having more fun with this honorable mentions category than I am the injustices. I think it's because we're having less injustices. I think at the start of the pandemic, it was more, hey, we're at the apex, and there were just a lot of fights that were just the wrong person was winning. And now that I think things are a lot more tightened up, it seems as though we're just, the right fighters are winning. Or not, let me say that correctly. Not the right fighters are winning, but the scorecards are correct. The scorecards are much better. They're much more polished. Although I do still have some, a couple niggles here and there. We're going to go to the first honorable mention. This one's one of those honorable mentions where I don't really crap on anyone or say anything because one of the rounds was close, and I'm talking about Martinez versus Canetti. I had it 29-28 for Martinez. This ended up being a split D, and with this one, I had the second round being very, very close. Now, the first round, all three judges gave to Canetti, so did I. And then in the last round, all three judges gave a 10-9 to Martinez, so did I. Now, it comes down to that middle round, right? The second one is very close. Second round is very, very close with Martinez out. To me, Martinez outstriking Canetti. Two judges have it that way, so I guess I'm not far off. But one Adelaide Bird has gave the second round to Canetti. Now, here's why I'm not giving. Usually when someone disagrees with me, technically I'll go, that person gets an honorable mention. This round was so close that I could have given it to anyone. I really could have. This round was very close that you can argue Canetti wins this round. It's one of those, there's a couple of these. If you go back into the vault, there's a couple rounds where they're just close and you can kind of toss it up to whoever. So there's no honorable mention on this. I just wanted to mention it because it's one of those things where when you look at a scorecard, you go, oh, it's a split D, blah, blah, blah. But it's not, you can understand that perspective. Now, I'm not giving her an honorable mention for the second round, but Adelaide Bird will still get an honorable mention for the first round because she gave a 10-9 to Canetti. In that first round, Martinez got a takedown, and then got reversed and outstruck. And got reversed. And Canetti outstruck Martinez. Mostly with leg kicks, though. It was mostly with leg kicks. It was a leg kick affair for Canetti in that first. Still, this was an obvious round for Canetti. That first round scorecard by Adelaide Bird, I disagree with. So honorable mention there for Adelaide Bird. Second honorable mention. We will go to our second honorable mention. And the second honorable mention is for Petroski versus Gilmore. This was one of the tough fights. Tough meaning the Ultimate Fighter. And obviously this fight ended in a TKO for Petrovsky, but the scorecards are a little sidearmed here. When I was scoring this, I believe, sometimes a little doubt creeps in. Some fights are just so all over the place, a little doubt creeps in. But when you rewatch it a couple times, or when you look back at it, you're like, all right, just stay confident and understand what you're actually looking at. I had a 10-9 for Petrovsky in the first, and then a 10-9 for Gilmore in the second. My scorecard reflects that of Mike Bell and Junichiro Kamijo, and then the honorable mention goes to Adelaide Bird. This wasn't meant to be a crap on Adelaide Bird session. It was just I was actually applauding her for that first scorecard, except for that first round, but on that first fight. But for this one, she gives Petrovsky round 2, and I disagree with that one. In that second round, Gilmore outstrikes Petrovsky, and though Petrovsky gets like a takedown and very little ground and pound, it's not enough to overtake him being outstruck. And instead she still gave it to Petrovsky. So there's an honorable mention there for Adelaide Bird. The next fight, the next honorable mention, is another split D. This one's a little weird, right? I think why I like doing the honorable mentions is I can actually get a little more thoughtful and nuanced, instead of just getting into the injustice and just saying, hey, this is the reason why I won, this is why. But for this one's weird, because during the broadcast, Paul mentioned this comes down to a difference of opinion, right? And while I agree with that, I disagree with that, because these are one of those fights where we've seen this multiple times. And while I can't name a lot off my hand, I can name one that reminded me of this, and that was Martinez versus Parisian, right? In that fight, if you remember, Parisian, I wouldn't say was grappling, but was clinching Martinez a lot. I mean, pretty much the whole fight was a clinch affair. But the thing that made it not boring was Martinez just kept punching. Martinez kept punching Parisian's face, to the point where Parisian ultimately wins the fight via split D, which I thought was the wrong decision. But he ends up winning split D. And at the end of the fight, they ask him, did he win? And he basically says no. I think his words were, I didn't think I won. I mean, look at my face. But that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is, in that fight, he outstruck Parisian a lot. He outstruck him. But what came into play were, I guess, timings of the clinch and the takedowns. And listen, I don't know how you got the other side to that. I had it, if I remember correctly, I had it 30-27. You might want to check back on me. I don't have the scorecard with me, but I believe I put a 30-27 for Martinez, or at least a 29-28. But this is what it reminds me of on this scorecard, because Chirico's, I had 30-27. I had Chirico's winning 30-27. And if you run to the judges' scorecard, it's a little different. It's just a little different. And the rationale makes no sense to me. And I'll explain the rationale in a second. First, Mike Bell gave it to Chirico's 29-28. Derek clearly had it 29-28 for Hiestand. And then Tony Weeks had it 29-28 for Chirico's. Now I'm not going to explain the first and the third round, because I agree with them, right? But I'll get to those in a second. Derek clearly gives the first two to Hiestand. That's where I'm a little off, okay? Because we're going to go back now to why I think those are the wrong decisions. Now, in the second round, all three judges scored the second round. All three judges scored the second round for Hiestand. Now, here's where I'm a little confused and head scratchy, right? Because I want you to compare to the first round, which is essentially the second round, but is more of a case for Chiricos. Now, I'm going to read the first round. In the first round, Hiestand got 2 takedowns, very little ground and pound, but Chiricos was very active on the bottom, and he outstruck him on the feet, right? Not all three, 2 judges gave it to Chiricos. I also gave it to Chiricos, right? So we can all agree, somewhat, that it's his round, because he was just super active. It's his round, okay? So just to get this out of the way, honorable mention for Derek Cleary. Honorable mention, off the rip. Okay, and while I do want to give it to the other 2 judges, I guess this comes down to this. I guess it just comes down to them feeling as though, because all 3 gave the second round to Hiestand, I guess all 3 felt as though the grappling was superior to Chiricos' strikes, because in the second round, Hiestand also got 2 takedowns, and he also had very little ground and pound as well. Chiricos was again active from the bottom. Now, when I say he was active from the bottom, I mean he landed more shots than Hiestand did on top. Go back on What's the Fight, and you'll see that. And while he was also active from the bottom, he himself got a takedown and outstruck Hiestand on the feet. So again, this is just the first round, except the only slight difference here is Chiricos got a takedown. I'm confused on how all 3 got that, but again, I could be wrong. I will always admit that maybe I fucked with the scorecard. Maybe I should have put a 29-28. But I stand by, it's essentially the first and the second round are almost identical, minus Chiricos' takedown in the second. Now in the third, it's basically again, the third again reflects the first, except for in the third, Hiestand gets 2 takedowns, but he's dropped. Right, that's kind of what sets the round apart from the first 2. Is he gets dropped with a shot, and he's again outstruck. So 3 we're gonna throw in the bin. Obviously, all 3 gave it to Chiricos, but for those first 2, they're pretty close. They're the same exact rounds, minus in the second, Chiricos gets a takedown of his own. So I'm confused on how this even ends up in a split D. Again, you could say my scorecard may be a bit too liberal. I don't know if that's the right word. Maybe it's too big in it being a 30-27, maybe. But I don't see how this is a split D. I think that's my true concern. So maybe my scorecard might be a bit too big. But either way, I have it 30-27. And yeah. For the next honorable mention, we go to Battle versus Urbina. I've seen a couple rounds like this, where the round starts off really quickly. Some guy gets jolted. I like comparing vice to that. I know you can't do that. I know it's not fair, but I'm just trying to give a picture of how I'm looking at it. That way I'm not just saying something and it just goes into the abyss. It reminds me of... Fuck, I wish I had it on the tip of my tongue. I wish I had it on the tip of my tongue. hold on. I believe it was the... I might have it. I believe it was the Saldana versus Jordan fight. I believe, maybe it might have been that, where Saldana was there was a round where Saldana was very active at the start, and Jordan just finished off the second half. That's what this Battle versus Urbina fight was. It was essentially Battle being he got took down. He got hit with some pretty big ground and pound that you could argue lost him this round. But this was in about a minute, maybe 30 seconds to a minute of the takedown and ground and pound. But then in that second half of that first round, or the remaining time, I would say, Urbina gets outstruck by Battle. And to me, shifts to Battle winning the round, which is why I gave it 10-9. Now, I could be wrong. I'll give myself an honorable mention just right now. I'll just shit on myself right now, and I'll say I'm wrong. Even though I don't think I'm wrong, but I'll say I'm wrong, just to show a little bit of objectivity here. But the reason why I'm still hesitant to that is because in that remaining time of the round, which I think was about 3+ minutes, Urbina gets outstruck, and I think that wins Battle of the round. We go to the judges' scorecards where Mike Bell and Rick Winter give it to Urbina, but then Ron McCarthy gives it to Battle. So I'm not the only one seeing what I saw. Again, even if all three gave it to Urbina, I'd still say the same thing right now. I'm not going to lie to you. I'd still say the same thing. So I'm just going to sneak in an honorable mention for the two judges that didn't give it to Battle. But, okay. There's that. This one I'm a little more confident in. The next honorable mention goes to all three judges. Derek Clearly, Saul Diamano, Junichiro Kamijo. For the round 2 they scored for Barboza versus Chikadze. Obviously that ended in a TKO, so again, this doesn't matter. The Battle one doesn't matter. When I say it doesn't matter, I mean in the overall scheme, yes, the fighter won who was supposed to win. But the reason why I do these honorable mentions is because there's been many fights where it goes down to a split decision, and I just disagree on the round. Martinez, Parisian. I've mentioned this like 40 times. I'm just gonna repeat fights. Collier versus Felipe. You could just name them. You can name them. You just throw them in there. Maverick versus Jesus Christ, her name just escapes me. Maverick versus Barber. You could just keep going on and on and on and on of rounds where you're just like, nah, I crisply believe that you got that wrong. And this is another one where, while we all saw the fight and was like, oh, Chikadze's winning, right? And when I say winning, I mean like trending to win, or he looked nicer in a way, whatever. That second round was Barboza's. If you scored the first round for Chikadze, the same goes to Barboza in the second, because in that first round, both were very close on the feet. Chikadze landed more shots, and he was much more active than Barboza in that first. You could obviously tell. I think that was very, very clear. Very clear. In that second, it was very close. And not only was it close, but Barboza finally picked up the pace in that second and was landing some clean shots. And landed more shots than Chikadze in that second. And I was surprised because I scored it, and I was surprised to see that all three judges gave it to Chikadze. But again, I already gave him the honorable mention. It is what it is. But I was just surprised because there's some fights like that are so close. I talked about, I think it was on the pay-per-view where, the theme after, right? Because I score the fights, then I look at all the media stuff later because I don't want that to influence me. But I remember watching the Green versus Fiziev fight, and the talking point was the last round. Obviously, we understand that. We know. Terrible scorecard on that last round for that one judge. But I'm surprised, and I'm not surprised at this because rarely do close rounds get talked about in MMA. It's only close fights, right? That's how it's pitched. But that first round, there was two close rounds on that card. It was I think it was a lot, but I can't remember. There was the Aldo versus Munoz first round, where everyone just gave 30-27 to Jose. When I thought that first one was very close, very, very close. Same goes with Fiziev versus Green in the first, where Fiziev is just throwing kicks, a lot of them blocked, and Bobby is actually connecting on Fiziev. And the only reason why we kind of all scored that for Fiziev is because he's just blasting leg kicks. Or body kicks, really, and leg kicks. But a lot of them were blocked. But, it's just one of those things where some certain rounds are close, but, I feel as though they're not really talked a lot. And now, I'm not saying that this second round was close. I mean, both were close in the sense that both were throwing very little, right? And both were, kind of just in each other's faces. But that first was obvious for Chikadze, and the second was very obvious for Barboza, and that's what I'm trying to say. Overall, good night of fights. Can't wait for next week. Thank you for listening, and God bless.